I'm Doug Thompson. Welcome to this edition of Legislative Updates with John Barker of the Kansas House of Representatives for the 70th District. Most of us get our information concerning the actions of the Kansas legislature either from some form of media or after the fact, as the legislation either became law or died during the process. Representative John Barker has graciously agreed to take time from his schedule to update pending legislation as the bills are moving through committee to consideration by the House of Representatives. Right after this short break, let's talk with Representative John Barker concerning this week in the Kansas legislature. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with special guest John Barker, representative from the 70th District. This is part two of a two-part show that we started a week ago, and we were talking about school finance. So joining us now, of course, in the middle is Dan Hawkins, and right next to me is Jim Denning. And Dan is from the 100th District out of Wichita, representative, and Jim is the Senate Majority Leader and out of Overland Park. Did I get it right?
You got it right.
All right.
Okay. Grew up in Great Bend and went to Hayes, but now I live in Overland Park.
That's right. You went to Great Bend High School and then off it to Fort Hays State University, and then gravitated towards the other end of the state.
Did.
Yeah, awesome. And you, in your real life, of course, are a healthcare administrator, aren't you?
Yes, I work for a group of eye surgeons and optometrists and eye doctors in the Kansas City area.
All right, awesome. Thank you. John, update us on other things in the legislature.
Well, just let the public know we're taping two shows on one day, so we're not wearing the same suits as we were last week. And we do change. No, it's just basically Monday, which will probably be the week after show is seen. We're in conference committees. I know Monday, the 26th, I think, or 27th, I'm going conference with state and federal affairs, chairman to debate guns and chocolates and breweries, alcohol, the three issues of fed and state. Dan, what will you be doing?
You know, right now we're just finishing up being on the floor all week this week. The prior week, all of the non-exempt committees finished work, which is what I chair. I chair a non-exempt committee, so that's all finished. We had all of the bills that are still out there under the line this week that came up, so we've been working hard this week at that. And then, like you said, next week starts conference committees. I don't have too many conference committees this time. I'll have a couple, but that'll be it. And I know Jim has his hands full because he's the one that gets to schedule all this stuff over the Senate. So he's a busy guy too.
I know. Jim?
So this is the last 2 weeks of the session, so it gets really busy. So all of the bills that all the committees that have been working on all year, this was their last week to get them out to the Senate floor and to the House floor. So I think in the last 5 working days, we have 55 or 60 bills that have come out of the committee process, and we will probably hear 15 to 17 bills every day starting Monday to get our calendar clear. And so it's going to be really, really busy, and a lot of the important bills that had taken all year to process out of committee will be being debated on the floor, so we will be really busy this last week.
Not counting all the amendments that will be brought for each of those bills. So what you think is a simple bill may not be a simple bill. And it may take 2 hours or 3 hours in debate. And the ones that you think are, well, they're pretty difficult to understand, they go through in an hour. So it is, but it's based upon how many amendments and what's germane to them and what other members, particularly the minority members, who will try to bring bills that will be of controversy or amendments that are. So it's going to be, it'll be an interesting 2 weeks. Would you agree, Jim?
Yeah, this is.
You schedule all those.
We start at 10 a.m. in the morning after we caucus, which is what caucus is we actually huddle up and talk about the bills amongst ourselves and then go to the floor and debate them. So we'll probably start our day at 8 or 8:30 a.m. and it could go till 8 or 8:30 p.m. to get all those bills worked.
Yeah. Fortunately for the House, we have to stop at midnight.
You guys,
we have the Cinderella rule.
You do have to stop at midnight, but we don't. So we'll finish up your work that you don't get done. Just
well, thank you for that.
Well, John, let me ask you this one,
yeah.
because at the very beginning of this, you said we're working on the guns, chocolate, and alcohol. I don't see how those all fit together quite.
Well, those are three issues that Federal and State Affairs works on. And so we passed a number of chocolates that have alcohol in them.
Oh,
So that brings it into Federal and State Affairs. We passed two gun bills this year, which got some amendments on it. The Senate put some amendments on that did not correspond with what the House had done, so we non-concurred. Now we're in a conference, so I'll meet with the Senate, Fed and State Chairman, Vice Chairman, Ranking Member. On my side, it's my Vice Chair and my Ranking Member, and we will discuss the issue in open to the public in a meeting, and then we hopefully, this is where the compromise comes in. We work with each other, and I will, of course, try to defend the House position. He will defend the Senate's position, and we get things worked out. So we'll have the gun bills, and then we'll have the chocolates with alcohol, and then we'll have the breweries, microbrewery bills that we have, and maybe some others that will come in later. So.
yeah, I remember you talking before about the microbreweries, and we're going to cut away, take a break, and we'll be right back. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with, as always, my special guest, John Barker, but also with Dan Hawkins, who's in the middle on your screen, and Jim Denning, who's right next to me. Jim, what the federal tax plan, what's the impact that's had on Kansas?
Well, it's an interesting change of events. When we've been analyzing the federal tax impact on Kansas, it actually is going to be a positive, and most of it's related, well, there are two things. One's easy to explain, one is not. The easy piece to explain is our adjusted gross income is tied to our federal tax returns. So part of raising the standard deduction up to $12,000, or what it's really high at the federal level, they have a law that says that you can't deduct more than 10% or 10,000 of what's called SALT taxes, and those are state and local taxes. But what that does to Kansas, it increases the Kansas adjustable gross income as well. So actually, if we don't do anything, Kansas will be paying less to the federal government, but more on their state return. So we could take that extra money that is basically a windfall to Kansas, and right now we only allow 50% of our property taxes to be deducted, and I think 50% of our mortgage interest. With that windfall, we can bring that back up to 100%, which where it was before the Great Depression, and actually use some of that windfall to give folks a break on their
property taxes.
The other piece is the repatriation. That's very complex, and it could be a positive to the Kansas coffers as well, but we just want to make sure we just simply don't spend that money. As much as we can give back to the taxpayers on the Kansas tax return, for instance, letting them take 100% of their property tax, 100% of their mortgage interest, and possibly even 100% of their excess medical, I think that would be a really good way to use that windfall money.
And it will boost the economy. When folks out here or in Kansas that has more money, they spend those money. They buy products. I've always said the folks out here, the taxpayer, spends their money better than the state or the federal government. And Dan, would you agree to that?
Well, and one thing I would agree, but one thing I wanted to add to what Jim was saying is we also had, and I'm not sure if the Senate has heard this, but in the House Tax Committee, we had a bill that was really brought by NFIB and the Chamber to allow the businesses to expense their capital expenditures back to 17. So we had that retro tax on them, but then we didn't allow them to expense the capital. That actually was brought up in tax this week, and it was tabled. It didn't go anywhere. Is there anything happening on the Senate side with that?
Yeah, that confused me as well, Dan, because it cleared our floor with 31 votes, and we had the debate about it, but when everybody realized it was an error on our part because we retroed the tax policy back, we needed to put that expensing on, and it basically mirrors up with the federal plan as well. So I was surprised, but again, I think this school finance issue is crippling our ability to govern, because that was a correction of error for small business, and at the Senate it wasn't an issue, but apparently it's an issue on your part.
Well, I think the unknown about school finances is everybody's kind of sitting back, well, let's do the school finance, and how is this going to affect everything else? And, there's a lot of apprehension in the House. a lot of apprehension.
Well, and I can tell you, there are a few of us on the tax committee that has went to the chairman of our House Tax Committee and asked him to bring that bill back up and allow us another bite at the apple. We were a little upset that it got tabled. It really got tabled with no debate. I mean, you could see that they were on their game when they did it. They tabled that immediately, and we just didn't have a chance.
Yeah, as legislators, I think it's important that we don't get paralysis from this school finance issue. We need to build our budgets based on what Kansas needs, and that certainly was a dagger to small businesses, and that should get out of your committee.
Well, Jim, you know, just exactly what you were mentioning there. Most families that are watching this program would say, you know, I try to keep a rainy day fund, some money set aside for emergencies. Does the state have such a thing as a rainy day fund?
Well, we don't have a fund currently, but the House did really good work earlier this year and sent over a rainy day fund proposal for the Senate to take a look at. And it cleared our committee last Thursday, and we're actually going to debate it this coming Monday. And Kansas currently doesn't have a rainy day fund, and I'm hoping we have one. And the logic behind it's very simple. Is you'll see these abnormal tax collections from different extraordinary events in the country. For example, last year the stock market returned 27%. The normal is 8%. So we'll probably have a blip of capital gain payments. So instead of spending that like we normally do, the rainy day fund that you sent over basically takes that anomaly and moves it into a rainy day fund. So when we have a dip in the stock market, we could move it back. So I have, you know, we did a lot of work on it, and you guys really sent over a good bill. Of course, we made it better.
Of course. Of course. When you send it back, we'll even make it better.
That's what I'm afraid of. But it is important for Kansas. We go through these cycles, and you know, we went through a terrible economic downturn in our ag sector.
Right.
You know, 13 it peaked, and then corn, wheat, oil, beans, cattle all really got depressed after that peak in 13. We're finally coming out of that a bit.
As someone who raises wheat and soybeans, it's on a upbeat, but not back to where it was.
Correct.
So.
Dan, how would you say the Kansas economy is?
You know, I think that we're looking at for us, it's really starting to increase. We've seen oil prices come up a little bit, gas prices are coming up a little bit, so that's got to help us. Ag prices are still, you know, they still got a ways to go. So aviation is on an increase. They're doing some great things in Wichita in the aviation industry, and like you said, unemployment. I was talking to an employer the other day that said literally we cannot find workers now. We're really, even though unemployment's around, was it 3.7, something like that?
It's probably in 2.5 area.
2.5 now? That's really full employment.
Right.
And so businesses are really having a difficult time finding qualified candidates now. That's a tough position to be in.
Yeah, but it's better than the other way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who want to work and there's no jobs. We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, John Barker. In the middle is Dan Hawkins, and right next to me is Jim Denning. We appreciate each of them coming in and being a part of the show because there's a lot going on in the legislature. And let me ask you, Jim, the economy in Kansas. You heard Dan's comments. What are your feelings about the economy?
Yeah, I think Dan's spot on. We've seen it in all three sectors of the economy. Ag is certainly much better off than it was in 2013. It has a long ways to go, but the commodity prices have improved a bit, oil's improved a bit. And what we're seeing in Wichita with the aviation, the manufacturing sector has improved a bit. And then you can actually see it on the retail sales collection. During the Great Recession and even up until April of last year, retail sales taxes were growing about 0.5% annual growth, and now they're up to 3.7 annual growth. And I think that just shows you that the consumer confidence is up, and pretty much broad spectrum of the economy is doing better.
Well, Jim, do you think some of that goes to President Trump, that the people have a feeling that the economy is doing better because of him?
My assumption is we're in this post-Obama era of fewer regulations, and just everybody's attitude in the business sector is more positive that we're able to invest our capital and not be regulated to death. And the post-Obama economy, certainly you can feel it, all sectors, no question about it.
And in the last segment, when you were talking about a 27% gain when the normal average is an 8%. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, the stock market, again, everybody has lots of confidence, and the stock market in the calendar year 2017 was very robust, and you're going to see that have a lot of impact on the economy for at least a year or two. I know it took a big dip, but when it's up that high, you'll see those big corrections that we've seen here recently.
Do you anticipate that will continue to be the case, that there will be growth?
I do. I think there will be continued growth. It's hard to predict when the next recession will hit. We always know there is one, but all indications right now that the next 18 months are going to be fairly robust for Kansas.
And what about the embargoes, if you will, in regards to that may affect the agricultural industry in Kansas, certainly? Anything about it?
Well, you're probably a little bit over my pay grade there. I'm guessing the way Trump acts is he's probably getting super aggressive to come back to some middle ground, but I know he's going to probably negotiate something better at the end of the day. But his MO is very extreme, and he'll usually pull back to something that's workable.
Yeah, I would agree with you. John, the economy, what's your feelings?
Oh, I would about the same as Jim explained. Unemployment's low, which is great. Grain prices are coming back. That's good for this area. When agriculture does well, the state does well, and we are coming back. As far as the tariff that President Trump is talking about on China, I think Jim's got it right on. He does kind of go overboard a little bit, but then he pulls back, and that's just his approach on things. That's what he did in business. And remember, he's not a politician. He is a businessman, and he was a very successful businessman. So when he tweets, which I personally don't like, but that's what he does, and you have to accept his warts as well as his good features. So I'm very positive. I like the idea of having the talks with South Korea or North Korea. He just got a different style than probably any of us has experienced in our lifetime, but it works for him. And I love the part where he's deregulating all those regulations that were placed in, which put a stranglehold on business by the Obama administration.
Yeah, it sounds like it certainly has helped the economy, not only in Kansas, but all across the nation. What about, there's been a change over in the executive branch, new governor's taken over. What's your feelings there? Did the lieutenant governor hit the ground running?
I think so. Doug, I've worked with Lieutenant Governor Collier, now Governor Collier, for 4 years on health policy. I think if you look what he's done on his appointments, he immediately, one of our first and probably biggest appointments was Gene Meyer Hummel, who he appointed to the DCF post. That's an agency that's just been embattled for a long, long time, had a lot of bad things happen. She's come in and done some house cleaning down in Wichita, in the Wichita region. She got rid of the regional director down there, replaced, of course we've had some bad things happen down there, so that had to happen. On the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, I have to tell you, things are night and day different there. Immediately he had replaced the secretary, so we have a brand new secretary by the name of Jeff Anderson, and Jeff's done a wonderful job. I have a new Medicaid director, and then we have a new state health officer, actually a Medicaid medical director and state medical director combined into one. Those three people kind of are the core leadership in the Kansas Department of Health on the health side. They also hired a brand new assistant secretary on the environment side. And so we're starting to see some movement there. Our Medicaid system called CanCare, those folks who are new there have immediately tackled some issues that we've been dealing with for years. The eligibility issue for long-term care was just unbelievable. They've put that group on notice that if they don't make changes fast, in fact they got till June 1, then they're gonna sever that relationship and pull that back inside and fix it. So I really believe our new governor has done some phenomenal things, and I think the people of Kansas are already starting to see it.
What do you think, Jim?
I think the legislature last year did a lot of positive things that make the new governor's job a lot easier.
Yeah, I agree.
You know,
with that.
coming in before he became governor, we had missed our revenue projections, I believe 18 months in a row, and things were tough for us. And when we corrected that last year, the budget certainly is more stable, and I think that's given Governor Collier a way to be on the offense rather than on the defense all the time. So I think we block and tackled for him.
We got to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. I hope you've enjoyed the two-part series. And, of course, my guest is John Barker, as always, and appreciate him coming in and bringing good guests in, and Dan Hawkins and Jim Denny. Nice to have you guys here. On the screen, before we leave, will be the contact information for each of you. So if people watching this show have questions that they want to contact you about, they may, and I know each of you interact probably daily with the new governor, and it sounds like it's a very positive approach that he hit the ground running. And maybe some of that is because it wasn't a traumatic event that replaced, it was one that was expected, but I feel confident with it. Hope you've enjoyed Legislative Updates. See you next time. Hope you have enjoyed this segment of Legislative Updates with John Barker. I'm Doug Thompson with special guest John Barker. Tune in next time for another Legislative Update. Thanks for watching.